What are you going to say to your favorite animal when you can communicate with it? This is one of the questions that researchers all over the world are tackling in the fascinating world of animal communication. Today, with advancing technology, we're closer than ever before to decoding the language of some of the world's most fascinating species. This is how machine learning is opening the window into the world of animal communication. Hi, I'm Danielle Dufault, and you're watching Animalogic. Today we're exploring the near magical science of animal language. Talking to animals, and more importantly, understanding their reply, is something that has fascinated us for pretty much ever. Just think of all the ancient books and religions that have stories about people talking to animals, like geese, snakes, and ravens. But it's only in the past few years that we've developed the tools to listen to animals in meaningful ways. Today, with machine learning unlocking new methods of interpreting and analyzing animal language, the dream of becoming real-life Dr. Doolittles seems to be not a matter of if, but when. And that when is getting closer by the day. There are ongoing experiments to understand the language of whales, dolphins, dogs, prairie dogs, elephants, and even cuttlefish. And one day, we might be able to have casual chats with some of those animals. Questions like that really keep feeding our interest in nature and science. We all love to learn more about the world around us, which is why I'm super excited to open this Curiosity Box. Curiosity Box is a subscription service that sends you awesome science-themed toys and t-shirts. Oh, nice! As well as books, experiments, and collectibles. It's a subscription box for thinkers. Cool. Every box is unique and full of amazing items you can't find anywhere else. Let's see what I got. These are two optical illusions in one t-shirt. The bezeled effect makes it look like the letters are different colors, but they aren't. And the Stroop effect makes your brain work extra hard to name those colors. It's confusing in the most delightful way possible. There's also this helix-shaped jigsaw puzzle, which tells you the history of life on planet Earth. And let's build this in 1 second. Ooh. And check out these slide rule chopsticks. They come with an inbuilt mechanical calculator. They'll make figuring out the tip easier than ever. A Puzzle Me Twice book, an exclusive book with 70 puzzles most people usually get wrong. And of course, a prism, Isaac Newton's favorite rainbow maker. No, really, we owe so much of what we know about light to this little tool. These are all awesome. And I'm already excited to get my next box. And if you love science, I hope you get yours too. Scan this QR code or click the link in the description and use promo code ANIMA30 for a 30% off discount on your first month of your subscription. And use code BODYDECK to get this awesome deck of cards that gives you a series of cross sections in the human body. It's super fun to shuffle. And even more fun stuff, if you get a yearly subscription, you get these denary dice. You know how regular dice have 6 faces? Well, this set has dice with an increasing number of faces, from 1 to 10. I know I'll use them for role-playing games. So scan the QR code and use the promo code to connect with science and spark your curiosity. Of course, these are not the first studies on animal communication. From signing gorillas to talking parrots and button-pushing puppies, we have thrown everything at the wall and nothing has stuck. But in science, just as in life, you often learn more from failure than from success. So let's take a quick look back at some of the most interesting ways we've tried and failed to communicate with our fellow Earthlings. Some of the earliest studies were done on our closest relatives, the great apes. This was the 1960s, and instead of trying to understand how animals talk to each other, scientists tried to teach them how to speak like us. This was the case with Vicky the chimp. Researchers tried to teach her English by raising her as a human and giving her speech therapy. But after 3 years, they realized that chimpanzees quite simply can't make the noises we make when we speak. It's kind of like us trying to communicate with dolphins by squeaking like them. Wait, has anyone tried that? If there's any dolphins in the audience, I just want to say... Since chatting with apes was out of the question, the strategy changed to teaching them sign language. Washu, Nim Chimpsky, and Coco the gorilla became simian celebrities for learning signs. Coco was said to know over 1,000 signs, but the signs didn't have grammar, and there were questions about how much she knew and how much her trainers projected into her body language and signs. There's been other experiments with different degrees of success, but in general, we can say that apes can learn signs, but they don't create signs. They don't have an organized way of combining signs to say different things, and they almost never ask questions. So it's always a one-sided level of communication. Talk about a bad date. The next subject would have to be an animal that communicated vocally and in more complex ways than apes. Dolphins. In 1964, scientists partially flooded a house with ocean water. The idea was for researchers to move in with a dolphin and teach him English. But what started out as a wacky sitcom premise quickly turned into a horror story. When Peter the dolphin became aroused and disruptive during English class, the scientist would handle it to relieve the dolphin and get him to cooperate. And in the end, after the well-deserved media backlash, very little science was done, and the dolphin didn't learn English. But a few years later, one of the most important studies in animal communication was done, also on dolphins. You don't hear about it much because it isn't as saucy as the dolphin house. But thanks to this study, in the field of animal communication, the foundations got laid, and thankfully, dolphins didn't. The researcher was Louis Herman. He wanted to speak to dolphins in a language that they would understand. Instead of English words, he created electric sounds that dolphins could easily tell apart. Then he taught the dolphins what the sounds meant. The genius of it was keeping it simple. Instead of focusing on how many words a dolphin could learn, he focused on what it could do with a small vocabulary of about 15 words. What he found is that dolphins have syntax. The order of words makes a difference. For example, human ball fetch means something different than fetch ball human. It seems super simple to us, but it's hard as hell for animals to understand. Those studies on dolphins sparked interest in learning about animal communication on their own terms. Hundreds of studies have been done since then. Researchers learned over the decades that prairie dogs' calls convey specific information, like the size and color of a predator. Vervet monkeys have different sounds to alert their friends of different predators too. Elephants and whales use low-frequency signals to communicate with other members of their group over vast distances. And bees shake their booty in particular ways to tell each other about the direction and distance of flowers. So we know animals communicate. The question now is, can we learn to communicate with them? Could I have told prairie dogs that I was a friend? It all sounds like a massive cacophony to us, but there's a lot of communication happening. We just can't understand it because we don't have the hardware or the software to do it. So here's where new evolving technologies come in. We can now use neural networks to go through massive amounts of data and find patterns. It sounds good in theory, but in practice, we have the huge issue that we still don't have that much data. So there are new organizations trying to compile that data and run it through specialized programs. One of these groups is Project SETI, a scientific and conservation organization of over 50 scientists all over the world. Their goal is to understand the rapid-fire bursts of clicks that sperm whales use to communicate. These bursts are called codas and seem to make whole sentences and even regional accents. So, for the past few years, they've been collecting thousands of hours of sperm whale audio to get some insights into their language. It's such an ambitious project that we asked the team leading those efforts to tell us how it works. These are the scientists who might figure out how to talk to whales. So we couldn't be more excited to have them on the show. One of the most ambitious initiatives is by Project SETI, who's trying to teach us how to talk to whales.
Hi, I'm Gasper Bigos. I'm a linguistics lead at Project SETI, and I'm associate professor at UC Berkeley.
I'm David Gruber. I'm a marine biologist and a distinguished professor of biology at the City University of New York.
So as a linguist, I like to study human languages, but in the past couple of years, linguistics have been really opening up, and we realize we have so many tools to offer. And in my opinion, sperm whales are, for many reasons, one of the best species to start looking in. They're incredibly smart, they have very complex social structures, social relationships. Like we have grandmas swimming with other whales. They're taking care of each other's offsprings, and they exchange in dialogues these clicks that on the surface look really alien, but if you look into them deeply, you can see a lot of linguistic traits, and that's how I was trying to open up my linguistics side from humans to non-humans, and it's been really exciting.
This isn't a project you can do by sticking a microphone in the water and then running it through an advanced machine learning system. Every step of the process involves a great deal of problem solving and collaboration.
When the project started, putting together interdisciplinary teams was really important because I don't have all the answers, but I noticed that I needed someone to make the cameras and someone to make the robots and someone to do the analysis. So for this project, I think one of the key things was working with linguists, working with people like Gasper. And there had been very few projects where marine biologists and linguists were working together up until this project. So this has been a real joy and learning experience for both of us.
The first step of their work was collecting all the data with as much detail as possible, and often in multiple ways. It's great to record the codas of a whale, but it's even better if at the same time you have the footage of what it's doing when making the calls, or heart sensors to see what the whale is feeling when making those calls. But that leaves you with a massive amount of data that's impossible for human brains to analyze.
As a human, you have a lot of biases, and when you're faced with something like sperm whales, it's really fascinating because you have to step out of those biases and really try to find things that are meaningful to this other species, which is, has very different lives. And so you have to get out of your human biases. And in a sense, we use advanced machine learning to help us that. Machines are just a tool here. Machine learning is just a tool in an approach where you can use this other tool to help you understand, to help you gain insights.
Advanced machine learning is also better at seeing patterns in different scales of time. It's kind of strange to think about it, but different animals might experience the passage of time differently than we do. It's like if a different species was studying us, but we sounded like this to them. So, by looking more deeply into the timing of the codas, the team is finding extra details that show a rich language.
Zoom in those clicks, you see way richer structure than when we started doing that. And I think that's really important because we're showing that this creature, this species, not only has complex lives and complex social relationships and are really interesting, they also have communication systems that can carry a ton of information. Now, we don't know yet exactly what that information is, but there's a potential that I've never seen basically in any other species. And I've worked with other animals before.
That's fascinating. And one of the best things is that it's only one of the many ongoing projects. One of the ones closest to my heart is Zoolingua's Prairie Dog Project. Kon Slobodchikov from Northern Arizona University and his team recorded the vocalizations of Gunnison prairie dogs. They observed that they made different alarm calls for different animals. So he ran the recordings through speech recognition software to see what the calls meant. What they found was that on top of specific calls for their main predators, hawks, coyotes, and humans, they also had descriptive adjectives, so they could communicate information like big black hawk. When there was a recurrent predator, like a particularly crafty coyote, a word would emerge. I wonder what they called me when I was trying to film them. One of the cool things about this technology is that it can be applied to different species. Zoolingua, for example, is applying their findings from prairie dogs to lap dogs. Dogs are our closest friends. They evolved from wolves to be our companions. They can eat our food, and a big part of their success is their ability to communicate with us. But most of this communication happens through body language. So their mission is to figure out the combination of barks and other sounds with dog facial expressions and actions, and figure out what they mean. This makes sense, because few animals communicate with their version of words. If you've ever had a dog, you know that a look can often tell you more than 100 barks. Imagine being able to talk to your pup. I'd love to talk to my cat Nebs. She's an extremely talkative cat, and she makes a whole range of sounds that all mean something pretty different. So maybe this would help me be able to talk in turn with her, other than meowing back and forth forever. Hey, cutie. Meowing at me from the top of the stairs? Yeah? You like being up top, don't ya? Programs like the Earth Species Project are trying to make that happen. Earth Species Project is a company trying to decode animal language. They created a program called Nature LM Audio and trained it with over 25 million animal sounds. The program is still in development, but the early results have been positive. And as of 2025, it's being tested on a wide range of animals, like crows, finches, and belugas. Back to cetaceans, dolphins are always one of the main subjects of study when it comes to animal communication and intelligence. And there's a lot of amazing research about how they communicate with each other and how it can help us in conservation. Just like whales, dolphins communicate vocally. And to understand what they're saying to each other, we need a lot of data. Wild dolphins, as you can imagine, are hard to follow. But some researchers are using the latest technology to get their clicks on tape and figure out their meaning. We asked one of the researchers who's trying to get a bit closer to understanding dolphinese how they're doing it.
My name is Layla Sayegh, and I work at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts in the USA. We can record them with these contact hydrophones that we actually put right on their melon, and then we also put digital recording tags on their back before we release them. They're all non-invasive technologies, and the tags, if they're bothering them, they can just jump up a few times and knock them off if they want to. And so both of those recording methods give us some really high quality data from known individual dolphins, which is kind of the holy grail for studying dolphin communication.
Those technologies are always evolving. The next generation of recorders has sensors that can detect depth and record the dolphin's movements, so we can see what types of whistles they do when they're doing specific activities. Dolphins have signature whistles, which are kind of like their names. When a dolphin does its signature call, it's basically announcing, "Flipper is here." But they also have shared whistles that they use to communicate with each other. We call those calls non-signature whistles. The issue is that to start understanding them, you have to first know all the signature whistles in an area to be able to tell them apart. So what have we learned so far about the non-signature whistles?
So there's two different types that we have done some playback experiments with. We decided to focus on these two that we have kind of the most data for. And so we've done some experiments that are suggestive, at least, of one of these types maybe being some kind of alarm call or sort of danger type signal, because we see most animals avoiding the stimulus when they hear it. And then we have another one that's a little bit more complicated, because that one, it's not playing back. That one is a little trickier. We've seen animals making that type of whistle in a situation when they seem to be kind of surprised. So they are hearing something unexpected and they make that whistle. So we have kind of speculated that it's sort of like a, what is that? What am I hearing kind of thing. We jokingly referred to it as the WTF whistle on the boat.
That's right. Dolphins seem to have a whistle for run, or I guess swim, and another one for what the heck? And the more we research them, the more types of calls we will find. And finally, we would never forget about the elephants. These majestic beauties communicate with very low rumblings, well below what we can hear. To us, it's just vibration, but to elephants, it's a whole conversation. The Elephant Listening Project compiled over 300,000 hours of elephant rumbles, which are low-frequency calls that our ears can't hear. One of their researchers, Dr. Michael Pardo, wanted to figure out if elephants had names. They knew elephants were more reactive after hearing some specific rumbles, which they hypothesized was their name. Based on that, they compiled close to 500 calls from over 100 elephants. They knew who had made the call and who seemed to be the intended recipient of the call. Then they ran the rumblings through a machine learning model. It successfully predicted who was being called about 25% of the time. Finally, they played the calls they had confirmed to be an elephant's name, and the elephants who were called responded strongly and locally to hearing those calls. So basically, it went like this: Victor! And Victor the elephant replied, "What?" You can learn about these elephants by checking out Dr. Pardo's YouTube channel, linked in the description. Okay, using technology to understand animals looks very promising and exciting. I'm sure there will be amazing discoveries within the next few years. But what about the animals that don't communicate vocally? Can we use technology to understand animal body language and visual cues? I mean, take us for example. We communicate with our bodies all the time. Cuttlefish are one of the last animals you would think about when making a list of chatty animals. But if you look closely, you can see them signaling each other and changing colors. We think they're communicating, but we don't know what. It's still such a poorly understood system that we went straight to the leading expert in cuttlefish sign language to ask how they're solving this problem.
So I'm Sophie Cohen-Bodenas. Currently, I'm a researcher in sensory neuroscience at Washington University in St. Louis. So what is really fascinating about cuttlefish is that not only they use this ability of doing dynamic skin patterning for camouflaging, but they also do it for communicating, which means that it's versatile. So sometimes they will do like a white patterning to blender in the skin, but also sometimes they will do black spots on the skin to communicate.
Dr. Cohen-Bodenas noticed that the cuttlefish were moving their arms in particular ways. They weren't random moves. They seemed to be saying something. So she started recording them and eventually classified 4 recurrent movements. The next part of the research was seeing what happened when you played the signals back to the cuttlefish.
We wanted to see, putting them right in front of the screen, and we wanted to see how they would react when we would present this. And what was really fascinating is that they were very curious about it. They would come by themselves in front of the screen and they would display the signs. And what was also very interesting is that not only they would display the sign as mimicking, for example, they see up, they would do up or things like that, which we would have been very interesting because we would have say, oh, it might be a mimicking signal or something. But it was a bit different because when they would see the sign, they would respond with a different type of sign.
But the ocean is dark, and marine animals often have to rely on their sense of touch, or mechanoreception, instead of their eyes. So what would happen if two cuttlefish wanted to communicate at night or in murky water? Or simply when they couldn't see each other?
So what we did is that we put a hydrophone, which is just like a microphone but for underwater, to record the trace emitted by the wave. We got the spectrogram and then we did the playback experiment, which means that we played back that trace to the cuttlefish. And why this experiment is interesting is that it cancels the visual aspect because you just display like the vibration in the water without them seeing one another. And so it was really interesting also for us because the cuttlefish indeed got really interested. They would tend to come to this hydrophone to display the sign. We interpret this first result as a preliminary proof that they could perceive it also via mechanoreception.
All of this data proves that communication is happening, but we don't know what the signs mean. This is where technology comes in.
It's really like complicated for a human to say exactly in which context, behavioral context, which sign mean which sign. So the idea is to have a colony of cuttlefish and let's enable them to display the signs along with the coloring patterns in many different behavioral contexts, collect a lot of data, and then have an algorithm that will find the structure for us. In all that data, the dream would have to have an algorithm that is going to say, okay, so 2 black spots plus orange plus roll is most often correlated, I say just as an example, eating. And zebra pattern plus crown plus white square is going more often being related to aversive display. And this is something that for a human is very hard to decipher, but a powerful algorithm will be able to possibly do this task for us.
Super rad. It's like getting an insight into the minds of aliens, which cuttlefish, despite some internet rumors, are 100% not. Although they kind of look like they could be from Pandora. It's hard not to be optimistic about all of this research. But before we start thinking about full conversations with the animals in our fish bowls, there's still a lot of work to be done.
I think there's a misconception that people think you just throw AI at any animal and out comes some translation. I think because it's working so well on humans, people are able to take that leap in their head, but now that we're really deep in this project, we see that is not the case. We can't just take ChatGPT and throw it at whales and out comes a translation. It's a significant climb that we're undertaking.
In all of these cases, machine learning is more of a tool than a universal translator, and trained professionals are still the most important part of the equation.
I think that it's really important to actually watch the animals and document sort of how they respond to sounds and how they're using sounds. I think that just putting a lot of sounds into some kind of AI and having it discern whether there are sort of patterns or things like that, that could be valuable in potentially helping to generate hypotheses that we could test.
And yes, through a combination, we will learn a lot about animal communication with the help of advanced machine learning. But there's something we always have to keep in mind. We have to do it with the welfare of the animals in mind.
I think the key thing is always keeping the whale center and asking that question is this study, is this finding in service of the whale, and just keeping that at our core heart of the project.
If we do that and start to learn more about the inner lives of whales, dolphins, cuttlefish, and other animals, we might have to change not only how we see ourselves in relation to the natural world, but also how we apply our laws.
If we're finding all these things about animals and languages, in a sense, this last frontier that the legal system has used as kind of a barrier to keep rights only to humans, if you're finding a species that can communicate with codes that are so informative, so it can be so powerful, right? Can transmit so much information. I think we need to pause and ask ourselves, well, what does that mean for the legal system?
In other words, there might be a point where our understanding of animals becomes so deep that we might give them some rights that are currently seen as exclusively human rights. But if the animals are so smart and their consciousness is so deep and meaningful, why wouldn't they deserve to have some rights? As technology advances, it's a question we might need to answer sooner than we think.
I'm a linguist. I started with linguistics with old languages. I studied really old languages. And those languages allow you time travel because, you have access to these people who lived 3,000 years ago. And listening to whales is like traveling in different intelligences, right? You have this amazing species. You can imagine their lives. When they sleep, they float like vertically. And you're just like imagining this beautiful intelligence, and you realize, maybe our position as humanity is not as high as we used to think. I think it keeps you grounded. It keeps you closer to Earth, and it can help you really reimagine maybe what the position of humanity is.
So yes, technology can help us learn about animal communication and support conservation projects. But we have to keep the welfare of animals first and not prioritize profits. We also have to make sure that we listen to them and really try to understand them, not just hear what we want them to say. Many of the things animals will say will require us to adjust our behavior massively, from our shopping habits to our eating preferences, to even where we choose to live. So here's hoping that when animals talk to us, their calls don't fall on deaf ears. So what should we talk about next? Please let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for new episodes every week. Thanks for watching. See ya, and take care. Nebula!